Hi, and welcome back to another Gravity devlog. For those who don't know, Gravity is a 2D platformer indie project where the main concept is you can stick to walls. I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty broad and cliche concept right now, but with nearing a decade of experience being a hobbyist game dev, I'm pretty sure I can pull something together by the end of development. All that being said, I only just started a few weeks ago and this project doesn't look like much right now, but consider subscribing because this is a weekly devlog series and things are only going to get better. Also, before we dive into things, let me quickly mention that there is a test build linked in the description, details at the end of the video, but maybe check it out. Last week I left the game in a pretty good state, where the main mechanic prototype was basically finished. However, there was one slight issue where the character would jitter and move around without player input. The first thing I did this week was look into that bug, and I found out that the inbuilt Godot ground detection function wasn't working as you would expect all of the time. So I scrapped it and built my own. It was just a matter of adding an area 2D node to the base of the player and then checking if a ground object had entered it. It was simple but effective. Weirdly enough, a side effect of this resulted in the gravity becoming lighter. I quickly realized as my character started being able to infinitely jump that my on-ground variable was always equating to true. That was an easy fix, and the main mechanic was finally working how I initially designed it in my head. My next goal was to refactor my code because it was working but it was not readable. It became mostly the same, but I renamed some variables, added some comments, added some white spacing, and then restructured some overcomplicated if statements. Naturally though, when you change your entire script, issues arise. For me, that turned out with the character bouncing off walls and the input moving the character in seemingly random directions. Luckily, I didn't make too many changes to the original code, so I was able to narrow down my search and find the issue. It was something so obscure that I likely wouldn't have found it for days otherwise. Essentially, I needed a rotated version of the character motion so I could add drag. Originally, when I applied motion to my character, I was storing it in a variable and then rotating that variable as I needed it. But I wanted to just have a separate variable with the rotated motion and then use that. But that's where the issue was, and it broke almost everything. So I just went back to my original method and it all worked fine. Finally, in terms of actual new features to the gameplay, I added 5 things. The first 2 are simple to understand. I added a gravity field that changes the player gravity to a certain direction when they enter the area. And then also I added in non-gravity walls which the player can't use to attach to. The third thing is coyote time, a brief moment before and after the player touches the ground where you can still use extra input. For example, falling off a ledge and still being able to jump at the last moment. This just allows the game to be a bit more forgiving instead of expecting perfectly timed input. My main motivation for this feature though was to toggle off the wall detection for switching gravity. Prior to this feature, the player would stick to the wall below an edge and never actually fall off. Now that has been fixed. The fourth thing was in response to the coyote time, which I call corner drifting. Essentially, now that the player would fall off a ledge like you would expect, they have to slow down to switch faces to the side below them. Ultimately, I want a game that allows for high speed and precise controls, so I knew I had to add something to fix this issue. Corner drifting allows the player to hold the crouch button and still swing around to the lower wall when falling off an edge. This actually leads to a cool move which I call the coyote crouch jump, where the player swings around a corner and then jumps at the moment they start falling. It's a kind of long jump that came as a unique consequence of the mechanics which I definitely want to explore when level designing. The way I believe it works is, while running to the ledge you are building up a sidewards momentum, and then when you fall off the ledge and attach to the wall below you, your jump aligns with the previous momentum your character had built, and then that sends you about twice as far as an otherwise regular jump. Finally, the fifth feature added to the game this week is what I call movement hold. Because the input is mapped differently on certain angles, it leads to some movement direction mix-ups when jumping from one wall to another. The way it currently works is for any wall angled between -90 degrees and 90 degrees, the movement is what would be considered the right side up. After they go past those angles, they would then be considered upside down and the input becomes inverted to compensate for that change. The issue arises when certain faces move the character into a corner. For example, the left input on a left wall actually moves the player upwards, and the left input on the roof moves the player left. So movement hold is where the input would remain to move clockwise if you were holding down the left and anti-clockwise if you were holding down the right. It's hard to explain, but playing the game with the movement like this is a lot more intuitive than the alternative. Anyway, that's what has changed in the game this week. I understand that the devlogs right now aren't too interesting, and I haven't really provided much context in terms of the project as a whole. So this time around I wanted to include a test build to hopefully allow you guys to get a better understanding of how the game actually feels to play. I'm not sure how I'll proceed in the future, but while I'm essentially still in the prototyping stage, I will probably release a build every week, then reassess the situation once I'm about to start working on the actual content that I plan to release in the full game. Just creating an interesting enough environment for the test build actually led to the discovery of quite a few things that need tweaking, but I won't mention those and see if anyone mentions them in the feedback. As for my plans on what I want to implement next, well, there's quite a few things, but the devlog for that will be the later week due to the fact that I have university exams in a couple of days. So all I can do for now is hope that you download the build and give the game a shot. If you do, make sure to leave some feedback in the comments. And then also while you're at it, you could accidentally maybe leave a much appreciated like and then even subscribe if you want to keep updated in future weeks. Thank you for watching another Gravity devlog and I hope you have a wonderful day.